Hello and welcome to Emerge 2025. My name is Lacey Jones and I am the marketing officer here at Infotech. We are your hosts for today's conference and I am incredibly excited that you are here. You are joined by over 300 attendees from across the infrastructure construction industry, where we are going to explore emerging technologies specific to our industry in over 12 sessions today. We have 75 state departments of transportation, almost 100 AEC firms, about 35 LPAs, and other attendees representative of universities, technology vendors, the contractor community, and other organizations specific to our industry. We would love to know in the chat where you are joining from today. In fact, we've even heard that some of you are watching from an airplane right now, which we think is pretty amazing. Our hope for today is that you walk away with new ideas and new knowledge that are going to prepare you to have a more thriving digital infrastructure to support an incredibly thriving physical infrastructure across our country. There are 4 specific goals for our Emerge conference today. The first is that we are here to share expertise on emerging trends in our industry so that you will walk away with practical takeaways to implement a better program for digital project delivery in your organization starting today. Additionally, we want to offer insights from industry leaders who are joining us from a variety of organizations from multiple sectors across the country that are going to share very transparently lessons learned and use cases that they have experienced recently in their organizations. Additionally, we know that attending a virtual conference can sometimes be filled with this feeling of limited networking, but we have implemented new things in 2025 to encourage you to build connections with other peers in our industry. You joined today's keynote session by attending the Zoom events lobby, and in the lobby, you will notice a Zoom lobby chat. Throughout today, I encourage you to use that chat to share maybe a favorite quote that you have heard, a statistic that was pretty surprising that a speaker shared. Maybe you want to challenge some ideas that you've heard, or just learn from another peer that has a similar budget and maybe similar population size that they serve in our organization. So please use that Zoom lobby chat throughout today to network and build connection with other attendees at our virtual conference today. And finally, learning is incredibly important, but it should not be limited to one-way communication. And that is why, even in a virtual setting, we are putting ample opportunity for question and answer time with our subject matter experts throughout today, so that you are able to walk away with the opportunity knowing that you had the chance to go deeper on some of these industry trends and emerging technologies that we are discussing today. In fact, every single speaker is going to ensure that they have at least 5 to 6 minutes of time for question and answers from you, our attendees, live during the sessions, and you'll be using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen for that. I mentioned Zoom events. This is the platform we are using today to have a hopefully very efficient and great attendee experience in our virtual conference. You navigated from the Zoom events lobby to today's session, and that's exactly how you are going to access the other sessions throughout the day that are most relevant to your role and the topics that interest you the most. We want you to know that every single session has a unique Zoom link. That means that every single session you will need to navigate back to the Zoom events lobby in order to attend the session that you would like to attend. And just know that when each session ends, the window will close, you'll return back to the lobby, and then you'll be able to navigate to the next session throughout the day. We have a couple of sessions offered at every hour until our event concludes at 4 p.m. Eastern Time today. Don't worry, we cannot see you and we cannot hear you. You are automatically muted and your video is automatically turned off through all of our sessions throughout the day. I mentioned questions. They're incredibly important. Please make sure that you're using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to speak with your subject matter experts and our panelists throughout today's sessions. If you want to interact with other attendees, there's also a chat feature. Feel free to chat away, and please know that we have Infotech employees who are monitoring that chat to help you with resources and additional support that you might be looking for throughout the day that is separate from interacting with our speakers for questions that you hope to have answered. And finally, if you have any technology issues throughout the day accessing the sessions, you cannot find your Zoom link so that you can access something that you're looking to enter as your next session, please email marketing@infotechinc.com and we will be sure to support you. Every conference has prizes, and Emerge 2025 is no different. We're changing things up a little bit if you have attended our previous Emerge conferences on how you can win. Just by attending a session, you are automatically entered to win one of the prizes that you can see on your screen. But there are 2 additional ways that you can increase chances to win. The first is by participating in our post-conference survey. We take your feedback very seriously. In fact, we made quite a few changes to Emerge 2025 based on the feedback that you shared with us last year. At the end of our fireside chat, which is our last session today, you will have the opportunity to take the survey and get 10 additional entries into the prize drawing. And finally, while we know that we have many people who are not Infotech customers joining us today, we also have quite a few people who are Appia and bitexpress.com users joining us. And if that is you, we would love for you to leave a Capterra review and be entered to win with 10 additional entries. We think that there is a lot of power in building connection and sharing the things that we're learning today, because ultimately that's how we're going to move towards a thriving physical infrastructure. So as you write down a statistic today from a speaker that maybe caught you off guard because you couldn't believe the stat that you were reading, or maybe they shared a quote that was really powerful and resonated with a problem you're trying to solve in your organization today, I encourage you to visit LinkedIn throughout the day and use the hashtag emerging solutions so we know what meant the most to you and really what you learned the most today. And we can't wait to see what stood out. And finally, many of you are looking to gain professional development hours by attending today's industry conference. If you are interested in getting a PDH certificate, look to your inbox this Monday, February 17th, for all the details to make sure that we can provide a certificate that accurately reflects the number of sessions that you attended and the total number of hours that you participated in Emerge 2025. And I'll share a few more details on that at the end of our fireside chat today. With that, we've talked about why we're here. We hope that you are so excited and the logistics of navigating our virtual conference today. And so we are ready to get started with our 2025 keynote, who is Shelly Nooner. Shelly Nooner is the Infotech Chief Product Officer. She has joined us after only about a month of onboarding at Infotech. Shelly is a former Trimble executive and has over 25 years experience across the construction lifecycle. She is an AI enthusiast, and if you have heard Shelly say this once, you will hear her say it many times. Everything starts with data, and you are certainly going to hear that from her today. Shelly describes herself as a curious business leader who loves technology to solve problems, to drive tremendous growth, and my favorite, to save lives. We are incredibly lucky to have Shelly join us today for our 2025 keynote, and I know that you are in for a treat. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shelly. Shelly, thanks for being here.
All right. Thank you so much. So first of all, as I make it through today, I'm nursing myself a little bit back to health. So if I sound like I have a little bit of a clothespin on my nose, that is absolutely the case. I am super humbled to be here, especially with this juicy topic that is surrounding us today. So I am absolutely passionate about where we can get to with the use of this new utility in our world. So figuratively and literally, let's get this show on the road. So I think one of the things that is super, super important to look at is, where do we sit today in our own journeys with AI? It brings me to a great quote from Stuart Brand. And Stuart Brand wrote the Whole Earth Catalog, I think back in the 1960s. It was the start to finding things, listing vendors, what is kind of like the first search engine in paper form. So in this new era of AI, I think a lot about this quote. It really hit home for me that I needed to educate myself quickly to the following: what is AI and how am I going to use it? One thing I did know and I did understand is data silos in our industry cause massive inefficiency in solving our biggest problems. When we think about, these problems haven't changed either, I would say, in the last 5 to 10 years. When we talk about labor shortages, supply chain issues, poor communication, inadequate planning, an aging workforce, slow technology adoption, concerns about sustainability, occupational safety hazards, all of which contribute to what I say is, project delays, cost overruns, and basic reduced productivity. So not having my hands on the right info at the right time, it stalls our decision-making progress significantly. So I started to kind of really dig in and wrap my head around that thought process for our industry. And I was looking at what are the ways that we could use this utility to build better roads, more sustainable bridges, safer transportation networks, better use of buildings and the space inside them when they're built, and. All of you know the use cases go on and on and on. So how can we do that with integrity in our systems and our processes, The ultimate winner here, I have a very dear friend in this industry who told me one time, Shelly, we are our own customers. We live in these communities we serve. We're beneficiaries of our own work. So ultimately, how do we do this in the communities in which we all live, and make a better place for our families to grow and prosper and our neighbors, right? So, well, and then several years back, I think the origins can probably be traced back to even the 1950s. I won't debate the timeline because I'm sure somebody has a much better stat than I do around this. Here comes this thing called AI, or artificial intelligence. So AI, a whole new world. That we're all in the middle of watching, trying to understand, trying to navigate. If you're like me, I'm mostly overwhelmed by the massive amounts of information we're being fed on a daily basis, from different industries, different companies, different players in this world, different folks who touch this. And then there's just a lot of folks who are extremely excited and want to know how can they start using it. So as we move on, it's super interesting to understand that, obviously, like everything, the data is what feeds the AI engine. So the good news is, where this is happening, we in the construction industry stand to gain from this. We can put the right data structure, frameworks, and fundamentals in place. And I do say all the time, and I think probably it is resonates with this group, is it kind of all starts with the data. And if you think about the data is the gas to the AI car, and good gas is a much better outcome for your vehicle than diluted or bad gas or even no gas. So as domain experts serving in the infrastructure industry, can you imagine how much data is being collected at each step of our process to plan, design, build, maintain these assets? How much of that data is connected is probably the first question. When I say connected, I mean accessible to even automate or guide our next steps in the process. How many times are people waiting on information to just do what's next? And to do the what's next, is that the best way to perform the operation to get the maximum efficiency and design or build better sustainable? What if AI could help us guide to that outcome? So I actually reached out to a couple folks before I started planning how I would, kind of approach this keynote and talk about it, and said, what are some of the impactful things you're learning or hearing or experiencing? And I had also a person who is on this call today who said, these were some metrics that were put out by Gartner that were extremely meaningful for me. And really what my takeaway around these is, guess what? This is a pretty powerful timeline. This is moving fast. I mean, are we behind the curve? How can we make up this time? And it really speaks to volumes to there's just no time to waste. We have to all pitch in as a community, and we must get started to understand this and use it. So there's multiple types of AI being used today, both internally to help businesses function with increased efficiency, internal processes. So let's think Copilot by Microsoft, allowing engineers to hunt, find, replace code, to solve tech debts, create better user experiences, better performance in our solutions. These are getting to be what I would call table stakes in our world, but it's also a way to assimilate what I would say is a first draft. Allow engineers to check and perform with maximum efficiency and scale. Think ChatGPT or Google Gemini, allowing users to distill massive amounts of information from user inputs all across an organization to solve problems like actionable next steps. What do I do? How do I automate to the next level? Think about the ability to automate permitting through the process or create efficient categories of software requirements. Outputs on jobs to be engineered. If you could do 1,000 customer interviews and understand what the problems are in the industry, and within minutes distill that to action and solvable problems, you can develop into a great software deliverable for our customers. Think about where we can go. It's actually going to get us quicker there to our mission. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Let's think about the possibility of externally helping our customers in the field and office navigating the complexity of construction contracts, designs, projects, maintenance on assets. How many times have each of us thought, I need to know this, or, okay, now I know this. What do I need to trigger as my next step? Let's say the update to my schedules, my contracts, my payments, assign resources, move equipment, look over the invoicing, reconcile that payment, submit the necessary paperwork to bid or be inspected to get paid. These are just some of the external tasks that AI can help us with. Make it easier, automate for folks. So in the field making decision, it happens much quicker, time is saved. What this amounts to is an exponential gain for every stakeholder across the ecosystem serving the construction industry. So if we look at our next, as we move on, where do we start? So this is the interesting one. Where do we start? Let's talk about our potential use cases. When we start to ask ourselves the use of AI, how can it help us get to faster, more predictive outcomes before the work commences? So keep in mind, use cases offer benefits internally, like we talked about, run our business operations, our software services, and externally, those things that make the lives easier for our users who are putting more predictive or prescriptive information in the hands and further automating some of the mundane kind of, I would say, admin tasks we deal with to decision making every day. So let's think about it. AI guided user assistant tools to be built upon existing documentation and support outreach significantly improves onboarding time. So if you go back to like what we talked about are kind of the issues we're facing as an industry, think improvement for workforce labor issues, adoption of technology. AI-powered recommendation engine that help contractors and suppliers quickly identify the most relevant bidding opportunities for where they're located, for what they have at their fingertips, their resources. All of this can be kind of assimilated based upon past behavior, preferences, historical win rates, subcontractor excellence, what makes a project on time, on budget, built better. So if we look across the past to determine those factors that help create the environment of excellence, but then let us think about how we can improvise even upon that. So all of that is possible with the use of AI utilities. Think costs, budgets, timelines. I mean, the use cases are exponential. I'm sure where you sit, you probably have some today you're dealing with. AI-powered bid assistance, streamline estimating, cost analysis, bid submission accuracy, pulling from historical data and real-time cost insights. Think if we could even link that to supply chain shortages, resource allocation, giving us solutions or actionable intelligence, again, before the problems become the problems, all because we've connected the relevant data. We've somewhat reverse engineered our world and looked to see what made things good, and then can put those into our processes going forward. There are many use cases where just combining multiple sets of data, or what I would say is a multimodal approach, right? Video, imagery, text, can provide real-time assessment of project at any given point in time. It really doesn't stop there. It can even highlight pitfalls based upon factors in the model. The model's trained to understand contextual relationships to things happening across the entire project and give us increased confidence in the outcome, or allow us to adjust things to increase our project confidence in real time. So I would definitely think there's also, I love this one because I believe there's such a huge use case for what we do in our industry to serve the public in a greater way. So using the data to help expose and the public and navigate construction, rebuild, real time, instead of reading and posting about potential upcoming and then having to determine how does that affect me as a person who lives in a community. Let's show on a map where they live. Let's help them navigate these things we need to do to rebuild our infrastructure. So if I think in terms of those public outreach potentials, I think, gosh, that is a huge ability for where we sit to foster really good, happy communities. I'm all in on this one. I think everybody would all be all in on this one. So I definitely would never sit in front of you and claim to know the vast amount of use cases that we have. But if you're trying to solve a big problem, I can almost bet that we could strategize together with what data and what tool could help do that and automate some of the steps in the outcome every time. So as you can see, the potential power of AI harnessed in the right way, it provides exponential benefits. So that leads us to some really good questions around how do I get started? How do I feel comfortable? If I'm going to go down this road, let's talk about what it takes for me to feel secure in this environment, to actually dip my toe in, start to look at these use cases. How can I actually explore this? How can I gain the benefits? So, I mean, I think if we're really honest with each other, there are concerns around data governance, data security in this new world. So I think it deserves a talking spot here today. I think a lot of people, including myself, kind of really sit back and say, how can I embrace this and use it and feel secure in what I'm doing and helping provide to users and stakeholders and people that our software serves, or our solutions serve, or our consulting serves. And so let's kind of talk about some of these, right? Recognizing and preparing for these are crucial for near and long-term success, right? So I would say, let's start with a data strategy. Data standardization and governance, very, very big topics here. Like the industry of infrastructure data is often unstructured, inconsistent, it's siloed. How do we bring this together? Have you and your organizations implemented, what I would say is a robust data governance policy and monitoring routines? That's somewhat the first step, right? So collaborate with partners across the industry to help in doing this, right? There's a lot of knowledge around these things. So data quality, do we actually know our data is accurate? It's being fed into a model that's going to give us a probabilistic outcome. So are we sure that the accuracy exists, right? So how do we actually mitigate the thought that maybe our data quality needs to be cleaned up? Privacy and security concerns. We collect vast amounts of data in this industry across sensitive project information, personal data, things like that. So I think it's really, really important to understand the partners you work with, the solutions you choose to ensure compliance, data privacy regulations, whether it's FedRAMP, StateRAMP, SOC 2, whatever those things are. There are a lot of information out there on making sure that the privacy and security box is checked, right? I think one of the biggest ones that kind of now is coming on the scene is bias in some of these systems, bias in some of these models. These models were trained, it doesn't matter if it's Meta, Google, Llama, OpenAI, ChatGPT, all of those big players in the industry are training contextual models, right? Large language models. Do we have bias in our models when we actually go to implement and use AI, when we put our data through AI? I think this is where I would like to say it is really, really important. This is where we're all extremely valuable. We've been in this industry for years. We have domain expertise. We know what happens in the field. We're subject matter experts on our construction process, right? So I think the human intervention here in helping train these things is going to be really, really important in organizations, right? Because we know our business. And now we want to use this utility to help us, but we've got to influence the way that works, right, as well. I think there's also, I would say, large skill gaps, and how do we actually deploy this across our current resources? It's very interesting because I think when I look at my own experience with this, it's not just a data scientist, it's not just a computer scientist, it's not just a machine learning engineer, it's not just the domain expert, it's all of that knowledge coming to the table in one place is going to produce the better outcome. Everybody comes at AI from a different lens, right? And so I think it's really, really important. I think in the world I've lived in product and engineering, in operations and things like that, I always would look at kind of the product requirement to the engineering outcome, and that translation that happens in between those two operations is really significantly important, right? So a customer requirement doesn't necessarily translate into something an engineer really understands right off the bat. So there's this translation layer that happens. And I think the same thing we're going to see in AI. You've got to have the experts sitting there to help translate, tease out the big problems we're trying to solve, understand the data we have our hands on, the data sets that need to be fed in, understand the governance and the security and the compliance. There's a lot to contend with here that need to be thought about as far as a data strategy. I think a lot of people also are like, hey, what's the cost of implementing something like this? And I mean, is there a cost up front? It looks huge. Where's the ROI on this? I would say implementation does require investment, obviously. I think the time to velocity can happen quickly if you experiment in sandbox environments and dip your toe into something that you can scale, right? So I think it's one thing to say, hey, I'm going to go put this across my whole organization. You've got to come up and define the use cases you're trying to solve. You've got to put them in a sandbox environment. You've got to understand the data that needs to be fed. You've got to understand the outcome you're trying to achieve. So there is a testing way to actually put an investment in and then scale when you see the velocity and the outcome. I think it's where I see a lot of people really internally adopting AI versus externally in their solutions or out to customers yet. Internal use cases are high. External use cases are really starting to hit, right, within product and things like that. So scalable, Go back to when we were talking about multimodal, right? You've got text and imagery and point cloud and video. Those are huge, complex data sets. So I think it's really something we have to understand is what is our computing challenges on these things. What is the data we need to have for the outcome, right? It challenges us to look at what data our solutions are collecting, generating, and the use of that, right? So I think in a lot of ways, AI will challenge us as an industry to rationalize our data collection. What do we need? What do we not need? So I think another thing that is probably near and dear to my heart is integrating what I would say is legacy or heritage systems together so that data sets can be combined. I mean, this is where, the use of really extensible, flexible APIs will help this, right? It's really hard to change a system out of the hands. The opportunity cost is huge. So how do we continue to let the information being collected, but make it accessible so that we can then devise a better outcome? I also think it's going to be an interesting thing to watch how field data collection plays into our process in the office long term. I think when we look at kind of evolving a agnostic approach to what device is used, is something that's probably going to benefit us long term. As far as I think the bigger thing to really be thinking about is how do we create the standardization that we need in our data formatting? How do we create the governance with data standards that we need to adopt so that it does become more accessible, right? So I see a world where construction is a very, very big pie, and there's a piece for everybody in there to play in this ecosystem at a grander scale, but we all really have to make our solutions kind of the information come together for those outcomes, right? So flexible API and AI architecture is going to be really, really important as we go forward. So I think with that, if we look at, hey, well, who can help me start this process? There is a lot to chew on here. I like ending with this last point because, the partners that you've worked with who have provided awesome solutions for us to get where we are today are really the people who understand the complex data structures that we're going to be dealing with for the use of AI and the outcomes. So I would say, if you look inward, it's going to take a community of folks that you've worked with, your subject matter experts, your partners in the industry, and some really good talent when you think about computer science and data scientists and things like that. But I do think it takes a collective at the table to, one, understand where we are today, tease out the big problems we're going to try to solve together, and then understand how to format and structure that data in a useful way that we can use an AI utility to automate what we're getting on the back end. So, I think it's we are living in interesting times. I am super stoked every day to be a part of this industry. I really, someone doesn't stay doing something for 25 years because they don't like it. They stay doing it because they see massive amounts of potential, and they have a higher mission and purpose they want to serve. And so it is humbling to be in this community, and the people that I've come across, even at my, month in here at Infotech, at the people's passion to deliver something good to the market, but also how do we just do this better together as a group, right? And I am very excited about the potential here. I'm super excited to work with all of you to do it. I saw some of the names that were going to be attending the conference today. So thank you for coming. Thank you for partnering with us. Thank you for engaging and stepping up to the table. And I think I will definitely say, I think we're going to do some Q&A. I would not sit here and say I was the absolute technical expert on this, but I will tell you one thing that probably most people know about me. If I don't know the answer to your question, we will hunt it down. We will find it together because it's really important that we all work together in this environment. So thank you.
Shelly, thank you so much for sharing just how to make AI approachable, which I think is a super relevant topic, especially in the government sector. We are going to open it up for a question and answer time with Shelly. So I want to encourage you at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see the Q&A feature. Please submit any questions that you have. We've had a couple that are submitted already, but I encourage you to keep adding questions. Shelly, the first question says, you talked about and acknowledged there is a skill gap to implement artificial intelligence. What is the best first step to overcome that skill gap?
I think the first step is to understand the problem you're trying to solve, right? From a domain perspective, understand the problem you're trying to solve. Once you understand the problem you're trying to solve, it is what data do we have that's relevant to understand to solving that problem. I think there's some awesome talent in computer science. There's some awesome talent in data scientists who can help that transition between understanding the problem you're trying to solve and truly engineering the outcome, right? So I think one of the things is the skill set. Well, first of all, there's also this interesting statistics out there that says 90-something% of folks are smuggling AI into their daily work. So I think there is this true passion for learning this in the industry and across every industry. So I think I would say computer science, mathematicians, data scientists can help you in that transition from knowing what you know about the industry, knowing what our issues are, knowing what data we actually generate and create, to how do I actually assimilate that into solving a more predictive outcome in the future. So I think there's in between that translation layers where you would find where you'd want to look at skill sets around data scientists and computer scientists and machine learning and things like that. And it's really inspiring to be at the table with domain experts and subject matter experts in the construction industry, and then couple that with that the brain power of data science and computer learning and things like that at the table. It's really inspiring to be on a whiteboard in a room like that, I will tell you.
What is the best way to begin implementing AI when so many government organizations are behind in technology adoption?
Wow. Okay. So what's the biggest? Well, first of all, understand hosted environments. Getting into the cloud is making data accessible. So I think that's extremely important. There's also a security element to the cloud versus in an on-prem environment, making APIs, making your data accessible. I think understanding what data you have your hands on, right? So where does that all kind of come into play? I think this is kind of a kaleidoscope question, because I would say that there is multiple avenues to understand what you have, understand a problem you're trying to solve. The other thing is it's very applicable that you can use sandbox environments to take what I like to call like short swings at things, right? So you can put this behind, an enterprise and a firewall, feeling, you have more comfort and confidence and security in that, to test some of these outcomes with the use of AI. So I think that's one thing, is take 2 or 3 use cases and test those environments test those in small environments in your enterprise before launching grander scale operations here. But I mean, honestly, it's the assimilation of data. We are all playing in different parts of this industry, and being able to get your hands on the data sets to tease out the problem we're trying to solve in the bigger grand scheme of things is really, really important. I also just think a willingness to, I hate to quote my grandmother here, but you can't bury your head in the sand on this one. You kind of got to rise up and educate yourself, and then start to think about it and implement. And she would be very proud of me for saying that, by the way. But you can't like you don't want to be looking over your shoulder on this one. Go back to what Stuart said. I definitely do not want to be the road in the environment. I would much rather be the steamroller helping lead the way. And that is one challenge I'd love to offer this community is, listen, we can be leaders here. We can be leaders in this construction industry to go show the use case and the adoption of these things, because we understand the industry and we so well understand the problems holding the industry back. So let's be leaders, not followers, where this utility has come on the scene.
I love that. And your tie back to your steamroller analogy. I certainly don't want to be the road in that analogy either. Our next question says, you said, quote, AI will force us to rationalize our data collection. Looking at the future state of the industry, what data is most critical and what data do we not need?
So I'm not sure I can answer that question unless you give me the use case. What are you trying to solve is where I would go first with that one, right? I would say rationalizing the data collection means we have multiple sensors out there capturing, we have multiple people out there capturing, we have a lot of data because we have a lot of process right now. So what are the multiple uses of data in real time so that we don't duplicate our creation or generation efforts, that we look down the hall at someone who is collecting the same thing we need to do our job, or a part of what we need to do our job more proficient. So I would say, it's going to help us rationalize where we spend our money on the generation side of things, because, well, I remember several years back, I had a conversation with someone that I said, what if you could create an environment where the water cooler conversation didn't need to necessarily, if it didn't happen, it didn't hold up the process. People had at their fingertips what they needed at the time to keep moving in their job, in the project, in the process. What if you created that environment? And then I also said, hey, by the way, water cooler is, how are you doing? How's your family doing? It's not, I'm looking for that information. Do you have that information? So I think you'd have to tell me the use case. And then I would say, one is like, let's look at where we do duplicative data generation. That's one of the best cost saving efficiencies out there, is where we look at, wow, that person has that data, that person has that data, that person has that data. We're all collecting it in different pockets, but let's rationalize that. And that's a more effective use of our dollars, actually, at the end of the day.
We're getting quite a few comments on the people side of this, the workforce side of this. So I'm going to summarize a couple of them together. Do
Sure.
you see a time in the future where certain tasks are only going to be handled by AI? And then what will ultimately happen to people because of that?
So this is a good question. I knew this one was coming. So one thing I can tell you is AI doesn't have a heart, right? AI doesn't, it's artificial intelligence, not human intelligence. So at the end of the day, we have to put our domain and our years of expertise in helping use the utility. That is it. And in our lifetime, you're going to continue to need that domain expertise that is drilled into these models. They are trained to have, not think in terms of how a human thinks. They're getting better and better for sure. But I also like to think of AI as, I always say, it's your first draft. If you go to do anything, gosh, what is it like to have a bullet point template to start your assimilation on? It's your first draft. And from there, you can make that get better and better and better and better and better. Now, what I would say is, don't be scared of automation. Holy smokes, I would love to add automation into maintaining my calendar or filling out my expenses. Who would not love that? Like, I'm free to let a computer do that for me. So don't be scared of the automation. Look at the automation as, now I can get to a better velocity on something else that is more impactful, more meaningful.
So that is a great follow-up, because we have a couple of questions that are addressing lack of leadership buy-in. Clearly, you are a leader who is totally bought into this. But what if you have a leader who is like, that is not important. That is 10 years from now. That is 15 years now down the road. How do you actually focus on being a leader and a champion for AI when you do not have buy-in from your leadership?
Right. This is a great question. So, and you know what? I should have had this in my bullet point list of things to think about. Change management. When technology I really think of AI as a utility to add. But when you think about that massive transformation that's happening, I think at the end of the day, it's a change management exercise as well. A lot of people stop because of fear. And so I guess for me, I would always want to approach it as to, what do you fear of it? Let's get to that root fear. of why you're worried about it or why it's not for us now. Because I do think one thing, it's again, it's not a turn a blind eye to how this technology is moving. It is be ahead of it and lead it. Be a leader in this space. And I think that is something. So I think a lot of times people stop because of fear. And I think it's really important to sit down and really work through what is the fear of the outcome. And I also think the internal use cases are the aha moments for people. When you can look at assimilating 1,000 customer interviews and distilling them into a requirement of a jobs to be done that makes 40,000 people's lives better because they use that application every day, it's just something we really should look at together. And how do you bring people into that, like, excitement, cautiously optimistic excitement, with checking the box on what their concerns are or what holds them back from taking that first step.
And you mentioned AI doesn't have a heart. People have a heart, but there's a way in the change management approach that you can take those things that focus on saving lives, like you talked about in your presentation, as the internal use cases to really focus on making a difference that I think could move the needle for some leaders who are opposing this idea. So we have quite a few questions and we have about 5 more minutes that we'll address them. So I'm only saying that because I have a flood of them in the Q&A and we
Okay.
probably won't get to all of them. But I so very much appreciate how engaged you all are in this topic. Someone said data ownership and sharing among owners, contractors, and designers remains a critical challenge for AI implementation. How can technology and solution providers effectively address this issue, especially when you have industry giants who are in the mix here?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. First of all, people who create solutions for data capture, their data ownership, so to speak, is an interesting question that comes up quite a bit when you talk about the whole ecosystem, right? And my strong belief is there's not a winner take all in this environment. This pie is big enough for everybody to play for that greater mission and that greater outcome. So let's do that. I think accessibility to an outcome, right? So a lot of things are looking at, who owns it? When should it be exposed? How do we expose it? And I think a lot of that, let's go back to the change management thing. Let's come to the table. Let's talk about those bigger issues we're trying to resolve together. And then let's see where we connect and work together to do that, right? That is super important. I mean, I think it is, again, I don't think there is a winner take all scenario here. I think it is, we all are doing valuable work here and we can all get to efficiency and increase productivity by working together, not apart. And if you really are, in the mindset that what your true goal is to create better communities of which we live, all of us live, then let's come to the table and work that together.
I'm a contractor. You mentioned that AI can help with bid submission accuracy. How can it help me do that?
Bid submission accuracy. Okay, so let's look back a little bit. So as a contractor, you probably know what bids went well and what bids didn't go well. But you probably wouldn't be able to look at every bid you've put and actually determine which factors really made that, unless you had somebody scanning massive amounts of data at any given time. So I think the use of AI to actually go, what I would say, generative AI, look back with the parameters of this was bid accuracy, this was not, and then scale those factors backwards. So again, reverse engineer your years of practice into something that says, here are the factors that matter in your bid accuracy. And AI can do those contextual relationships of data and produce somewhat of a prescriptive outcome for you to look at. Again, first draft for you to say, okay, this actually makes sense. But let's think of it even further. Let's say you get that kind of best in class bidding world that you now say, okay, now I see how all of these pieces came together for a better bid, for a more accurate bid. How do you auto-populate that going forward into your new bids? So take it a step further. Let's look at actually not just understanding what the factors were for the bid accuracy, which AI can definitely help you with, but let's talk about how do we then look forward to pre-populating what are the things we do need to be looking at to provide better bid accuracy in the future. And that is the two sides of AI that's very helpful. People usually stop at now I understand. Now let's think about how do I deploy that forward?
We're gonna take a couple more sessions before we wrap up. What
Okay.
role is infotech playing in AI in the construction industry?
Oh, wow. So I will say, again, in my 30 plus hot days in here, so far, I have come across a massive amount of inspirational people who are thinking about this. There is, as a trusted partner, so in the people who built your solutions, they understand your data schemas, they understand your data structures, they can help in factoring. They should be a partner at that table to help you factor. I'm trying to solve this big problem. Here's how things were built. Here's the data we capture. Here's the data I need to assimilate to actually get me an outcome. And I think Infotech has a wealth of knowledge. And the other thing I think too is that I love about the culture here is this trusted partnership. Wow, it is like so many years of trusted partnership serving this community and serving this customer that I think is, when you think about who you would put at the table to help you solve these problems, this would be the folks in this building for sure.
How important is it to invest in the quality of your data before jumping into AI tools, or can you do those things simultaneously?
I think well, there's some initial things you can do with data quality or even accuracy. So you can run through some initial data cleansing, data accuracy. I mean, I think it is important that you understand that going in, because again, go back to the car analogy, go back to a uh, premier athlete analogy. I mean, your outcome is only going to be as good as what you put in it. And so I do think it's really important to understand how you put in a data structure and a data framework and understand, if you feed inaccurate data, you're going to get not a good outcome, right? So I think you've got to understand your data. You have to understand your data strategy and your data governance and your data quality and your data security and those things. These things do not have to happen one and then another. They can happen in parallel in a testing environment. By the way, testing is a very, very good mechanism to understand where you're sitting and what cleanup you may need to do. But I do think you don't want to submit bad fuel into a car. You're not going anywhere.
Our final question, if you could use AI to solve any problem in the world, one problem, what would that problem be that you would solve?
No more deaths on our roads.
Mm.
And I'll tell you, 3 years ago, I had the great, yeah, I might even cry when I talk about this one, man, because I'm so passionate about this one. But I had this great demo of this solution that was brought to me that was a safety site analysis in design. And it was a very interesting concept. And when I saw it, my mind just, kind of that little exploding emoji, like, whoa, what could I do with this? This is amazing. And a really interesting piece of tech that I thought, why isn't everyone using this? Because it really looked at a huge interchange and it told in the design if the tolerance for catastrophic loss of life, what that meant. So where did that stripe in the road need to be for 55 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour, 35 miles an hour? And I was absolutely blown away. And I thought to myself, I asked the question, I go, before this was ever a thing, how did we do this if we needed to change that tolerance? And the response I got was, we moved the stripe in the road. And I thought, oh my God, we could do something so much better than putting contractors out there to try to figure out how to move the stripe in the road to match a tolerance. This actually in the design phase helps them. Wow, how do I, because, and then I started thinking bike paths and how we build our communities and the safety of human beings. So I was like, yeah, I think if you were to say what my one passion is, I would love to drive down the highway and never see another wreck.
Well, on that note, I couldn't think of a more inspiring or better answer, as we all serve this industry and we all play a critical role in making sure that we have a thriving physical infrastructure where we would love to see safety as top priority and certainly no more deaths, like you mentioned. Shelly is based in Colorado, and I would love for you all to give a round of applause so loud that she could hear it, even in Colorado, regardless of where you are from. Thank you so much, Shelly, for being here. Thank you for taking so much time to answer questions. This was a phenomenal start to Emerge 2025. Taking feedback from last year, something new is that we have implemented more breaks and a greater transition time between sessions. So I want you to make sure that when you go in the Zoom events lobby, you are paying attention to when the next session starts. There are multiple tracks for you to join throughout the day. We hope that you enjoy a very short break now. Our next session will begin at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, where we are going to have two incredible sessions, one focused on why you need veterans in your construction workforce, and hearing not only from industry veterans, but military veterans as well. And at the same time, there is a session focusing on audits. It's the least favorite word, but it is a very important word, especially in our industry. Thank you again for joining us. We hope that you have a incredible day. Don't forget, if you have any technical issues, please email marketing@infotechinc.com. Otherwise, we will see you throughout the day, and everyone will come back together at 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time for our fireside chat with Trimble, Esri, and Autodesk. Thank you so much.